Welcome to Cracked Open, a podcast about life, love, loss, and the truths we discover along the way. Together, we'll explore the struggles that shape us, the lessons we carry, and the hope that keeps us moving forward. This is more than stories. It's honesty. It's healing. It's real. Let's get started. And now your host, Glen Nunes.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Cracked Open. I'm Glen Nunes, your host, and as always, thank you for spending your day with me, whether you're out just driving down the road or sitting on your porch, maybe walking your dog, maybe you're at the gym, or just trying to make sense of life like the rest of us. But I'm grateful you're here, and if you're a returning listener, thank you for coming back, and if it's your first time joining me, welcome. I hope that something we talk about today helps you, encourages you, challenges you, or maybe simply reminds you that you're not alone and life is life. One of the things that I love about this podcast is that we don't pretend to have all the answers. I come here to talk about real life, the victories, the failures, the heartbreaks, the mistakes, the lessons, the blessings, and sometimes the things we'd rather not admit to ourselves. And that's exactly where today's episode begins, because today we're talking about something that has destroyed friendships, divided families, ended relationships, ended marriages, split churches, ruined businesses, started wars, and kept people trapped for years. It's pride. And its close cousin, ego. The scary thing about pride is that most of us can see it in other people long before we see it in ourselves. We can spot the arrogance, and we can spot the stubbornness. We can spot somebody else's refusal to admit they're wrong. But when pride is living inside our own heart, it has a way of disguising itself as strength, conviction, independence, self-respect, or even righteousness. So today I want to talk about what pride really is, when it's healthy and when it's destructive, and how ego can quietly take control of our lives. And why some of the greatest breakthroughs we'll ever experience begin with these three simple words: I was wrong. We're going to strip away the noise, drop the masks, and look at life, love, heartbreak, and healing through raw, unfiltered honesty. And if you're tuning in with me today, thank you for walking this hard road with me and yourself. So let's get cracked open. So today, this topic, it's quietly destroying thousands of lives, thousands of relationships, and futures right now. And we're talking about pride and ego. By definition, if you look it up, pride is an inflated sense of one's status, achievements, or rightness. It's the rigid voice inside your head that tells you that you can never admit defeat. But on this show, we don't look at textbook definitions. We look at the soul. Spiritually, pride is nothing more than a high-priced defense mechanism. It is a prison of our own design. It is the stubbornness, the sheer obstinacy that forces a person to stay trapped in a miserable, toxic, controlling situation, walking on eggshells just because their ego is too terrified to admit to their families, to their friends, and to the world that they made a catastrophic mistake. Pride can make people spend months protecting a mistake rather than having the courage to just fix it. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's get cracked open on this. And I think pride and ego might be one of the strongest directions I've mentioned in months. And why pride and ego is a good thing to discuss? Because pride and ego, it's not like any of these other episodes. It's not waiting. It's not letting go. It's not detachment. It's not reconciliation. It's not moving on. Those are all roads that eventually can circle back to your situation. But pride and ego, it's bigger. It applies to marriages, friendships, families, politics, churches, businesses, music, leadership, ourselves. And the beauty of it is that we can talk about this and be brutally honest without making it about one person or anybody. So, for example, how many relationships fail because nobody wants to say, I'm sorry, or I was wrong, or you were right, or help me? That's pride. And when I decided to do this episode, I come up with titles, and these are a couple I came up with. I am calling it Pride and Ego, but I was also thinking of calling it When Pride Costs You Everything, or The Most Expensive Thing You'll Ever Own, Your Ego. That's a great title. How about this one, Pride Before the Fall? They're great titles, right? But lately I've been thinking about how many of life's biggest disasters don't start with hate. They start with pride. A person won't apologize. A person won't forgive. A person won't admit that they made a mistake. A person would rather be right than be happy. Isn't it sad? And before they know it, they've lost a relationship, a friendship, a business, or years of their life. Years can just go right by. And pride, terrible thing. It's the cause of most of the stuff. Look at the Titanic. You guys all know that story, right? Everybody knows that. The unsinkable ship. The arrogance of believing it couldn't sink. Guess what? Pride. How about Abraham Lincoln? Lincoln filled his cabinet with political rivals. Most leaders want yes men. Lincoln wanted truth. And there's the difference. That requires humility. How about the prodigal son's brother? Everybody talks about the younger son. The older brother's pride is what kept him outside the celebration. He was disgusted with his dad instead of celebrating his brother's return. Pride. How about Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest athletes ever? Huge ego. But later in life, after Parkinson's got to him, many people saw such a deeper humility emerge inside this man. And this is why I think this episode could become special. As we go on here, I'm going to talk about times in my life when pride hurt me, and times when I refused to listen, and times when I thought I knew best, and times when I was too stubborn. I could sit here for hours and tell you about everybody else's pride, judge everybody and say this, that. But when someone talks about their own pride or something they experienced, I think it hits a little harder, because experience and testimony are the two best things you can research in anything. That's just my opinion. And I don't want to say all pride is bad. That's too simple to say. But pride protects the ego, and humility protects the future. You think about that, okay? Because most people, they think pride is arrogance. The guy bragging, the woman who thinks she's better than everyone else, the loudmouth in the room. But I've learned pride is often much quieter than that. It's so much quieter. Pride isn't always thinking too highly of yourself. Sometimes pride is refusing to apologize, refusing to ask for help, refusing to forgive, refusing to admit you're hurt, refusing to admit that you've done something wrong, refusing to change your mind, refusing to let go of being right, refusing to make the move, to make a move. And I think about this. How many years have been lost between two people that both wanted to win an argument? Think about that. You probably can think about thousands of stories, right? And I want to ask you a compelling question. This one might rattle your chest a little bit if you're sitting in the waiting room of someone else's mistake. I talked about this in the last couple of episodes, and I'm going to be doing an episode. I don't know if I'm going to do it this season because I'm trying to move forward and be positive, but I have so much information on rebounds, and it keeps coming up. I just sat with somebody the other day. They were talking to me about a rebound situation that they were involved in. They finally got out of it. But I was just listening to them, and I was like, oh my God. I knew what they were talking about. And I knew exactly what they were talking about. And the ending is what I've been talking about. It actually played out like they listened to my podcast or listened to what I've been saying. But I told them, I said, if you would have asked yourself this before they went back and forth with this person, if that rebound situation actually worked, which it very rarely does. We'll get into that when I do the rebound episode. They very rarely work. It's got to be perfect scenarios, and the stats show it, and once in a while they work. But high percentage of the time, they just don't work. They're built on garbage. But if the rebound did work, I asked this person, do you think they would have still reached out to you? And they just looked at me and said, wow, I don't know. And they told me that one night this person texted them at 5:30 in the morning, and that's what got them back and forth. And I said, if they were genuinely happy, would they have texted you that morning and told you they couldn't sleep and they needed to talk? And the situation that I'm talking about, this person said they thought they were genuine. They were really repentant of what they did, and they were so sorry, and they opened up, and at least they came clean. But when you ask that question, sometimes the truth is hard to swallow, but it breaks your heart. Like this person I was talking to, when I asked them that question, I said, wow, I feel like I was just waiting in that hallway that I heard you talk about on one of your podcasts while this parasite was occupying the room. And it infuriated them. They felt like they were treated like an option. But they know they were the destination all along. But you know what? You have to look at the big picture. You have to look at the spiritual engineering behind closed doors. Every single time that I've tried to force a door open, or someone new, just to have dinner, or just to force a distraction, or just to get some pain, you know what happens to me? Oh, you know what has happened to me? God slams the door right in my face. It's unbelievable. This is what he did to me. So this is experience that I'm talking about. I fought harder to let situations go than I ever fought to hold on. But God kept telling me, nope. He just kept keeping me right in the hallway. He just kept that door slightly open and someone knocking on it. And why? Why do you think? Because divine intervention doesn't care about our timing. He blocks every single counterfeit path to keep your soul reserved for the real thing. And if you're stuck in that hallway today, stop trying to force open the wrong doors. Just stand still, test the echo, and trust the path that he has you on. He really has a plan for you. And you know what? I want you to just relax right here and think about it. I want this podcast to be positive and powerful and hopefully help you. And I don't want to spiral some crazy thoughts in your head. This was just through a conversation I just recently had, and it brought up personal things that I've gone through. And after saying that, that brings me to this powerful image. I want you to close your eyes for a second. I want you to picture an acrobat. They're walking across on a thin wire, suspended high above the ground on a high wire. Underneath that wire, stretched out tight, is a massive, sturdy safety net. Because that net is there, the acrobat feels completely secure. They can do the flips, they can take the reckless risks, and they can play games up on that wire. They can do whatever they want. Why? Because their subconscious mind knows that if they slip, if everything hits the fan, that net is right there to catch them. And they absolutely have no fear of the consequences of the fall. And listening to me say that, how many of you are out there acting as a safety net for someone who actually chose to walk out of your life? Think about it. And I don't know your situation, but say you are being a safety net because they know you're going to be there, and they're in some chaotic, miserable, crazy situation, but they keep prolonging it because they know that you'll always be there to break their fall. Right? They know they can text you when they're lonely. They know they can lean on you whenever they're drowning. And then, what happens? They walk back right on that wire, don't they? They have the luxury of dragging their feet because you are absorbing the impact of their choices. But hear me loud and clear today. A safety net is a resource. It's not a permanent guarantee. And what happens when you physically pull the net away? What happens? And when somebody is up on that high wire protecting their pride and dragging their feet, they fool themselves into thinking that safety net is permanent. They think I can clean up my mess whenever I'm ready because so-and-so will be there for me. And maybe this is true. Maybe this is true. If it is divine intervention and you love somebody, hey, You do what you got to do. I'm not telling you not to hang in there. I'm not telling you to go back on your faith if this is a situation you're in. Everybody's situation's unique. I say that all the time. But I'm just saying, don't let someone take advantage of you. And again, I'm not putting words in people's mouths. I'm not putting things in people's hearts. I'm not saying somebody is taking advantage of you. They could be in a terrible situation and they really don't know how to get out of it. And you know what? Thank God that you're there for that safety net, because something bad could happen to them, or they could go into massive depressions. They could do something crazy, or they could prolong even longer. And maybe one day something will click in their head. And I have a podcast coming up about that coming up soon that's relating to this topic. And as I said, everyone's situation is different. But reality doesn't freeze just because your ego is paralyzed. Life moves forward. The clock keeps ticking. And if someone is suffocating in a prison of their own making, letting maybe some parasite control them, I don't know. Maybe they're in a terrible situation and they're allowing it. But you have to understand, some things are just out of your control. And if they're allowing these things to happen, there's nothing you can do. All you can do is be there for them if you want to, if it's in your heart. And you have to move forward, because new doors are opening on the shoreline for you. New paths are being laid down. And out of nowhere, when you least expect it, a genuine, clean connection can fall right into that safety net's lap. And I'm talking you being the safety net. Someone who is actually ready for real, uncomplicated love. Somebody that's not carrying a whole bunch of self-made problems that they've created and living in all kind of chaos and unresolved pride. Going back to it, it's all about pride. But we're going to talk about this as we move forward. And if I don't get to it in this podcast, because I run down rabbit holes, I will get to it in another one. You have different options here. You have the divine intervention, you have somebody new, or you have the third scenario. I talked about that in my last podcast. But what I want you to understand here is the gravity of that moment. You can love someone enough to die for them. You can pray for them on your knees with tears in your eyes until you feel like your face is bleeding. But you cannot allow your own spirit to be permanently crushed in the waiting room while they protect some facade. You just can't do it. And by the time they finally wake up and they look down and they decide they're ready to jump off that wire, they might find that safety net is completely gone. It could be moved onto someone else who actually appreciates its value. And when someone drags their feet, they're not just delaying healing, they're actively risking their future. And when the net is gone, they have to face that hard ground entirely alone. And that's terrible, and I don't wish that on anybody. And that being said, I've been thinking a lot lately about photographs. It's amazing how a single picture can tell a completely different story than what's actually happening in someone's life. You can look at a picture of a family smiling. You can look at a couple holding hands, a musician standing on stage, a successful business owner getting his award, a person laughing with friends. From the outside, it looks like everything is perfect. But you know what? Most of the time, the truth is very different. Sometimes the smile's not real. Sometimes it's covered up by fear, pain, loneliness, regret, confusion, exhaustion. And as time goes on, I realize more now that people are carrying things that we know nothing about. And sometimes we stay in situations for longer than we should, not because they're healthy and not because they're right, but because momentum is a powerful thing. And we get comfortable, we get familiar, we keep moving in the same direction because changing direction would force us to ask hard questions. And that's where pride starts showing up. Because pride isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it says, just keep going. Don't admit there's a problem. Don't ask for help. Don't let anyone know you're struggling. And some people will say, I want to keep my private life private. They keep smiling for the pictures. They say, maybe this is easier just to deal with it. No, it's not. That's a crock of bullshit. And before you know it, they're spending more energy protecting an image rather than protecting their peace. And that's the trap of ego. Ego is concerned with appearances, while humility is concerned with truth. You have to be humble. Put your pride, your ego aside, and do the right thing. And some of the most important turning points in life, it happens the moment that we stop asking, how does this look? And we start asking, is this real? I want to ask you a question. How many relationships, friendships, business partnerships, family connections, and all kind of other situations have been damaged because somebody needed to be right? Think about it. Not because somebody was evil, not because someone didn't care, not because there wasn't love, but because neither person was willing to take the first step. Standing in front of that mountain looking at it, but not taking the first step. Pride has a funny way of convincing us that winning is more important than healing. We want the apology. We want the acknowledgement. We want the other person to make the first move. We want them to admit that they're wrong. And while we're standing there waiting, days turn into weeks. Weeks turn into months. Months can turn into years. The tragedy is that many people don't lose the relationship because of the original problem. They lose it because pride built a wall that nobody was willing to climb. And I've learned something over the years. Being right and being wise are not the same thing. Being right may win you the argument, and wisdom may save a relationship. Being right may satisfy your ego, but humility may save your future. And sometimes the strongest person in the room isn't the one who wins. It's the one willing to say, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Help me understand. And let's fix this. Those words don't make us weak. They make us free. Because every breakthrough in life begins when pride finally loosens its grip and truth is allowed to enter the room. Now let's look at the actual science behind this. I've been digging into data and checking out relationship psychology studies, and the numbers don't lie. The data shows upwards of 90% of rebound relationships collapse within the first few months to a year. And when I did this research, it could be within 2 months. And even though they can last longer, even though these things can take a while, the stats show that people get suckered in. Sometimes it's a narcissist, it's a controlling situation. But the stats show within a couple of months, the rebound is already collapsed and it's never going to work. They could stay together, but it's already collapsed. The person's either already cheated, already left them, came back, broke up, came back. There's all these reasons. But the stats show when the mask falls off, when these people jump into these rebounds and they're just trying to distract themselves from the situation they're in, the stats show within a couple of months, it's already over. And prolonging it just makes it worse. You're just wasting precious days of your life. You really are. And why do they fail so predictably? Because a rebound isn't built on genuine love. It's not built on connection or healing. It's a distraction. That's all it is. It's an emotional painkiller used to numb the terrifying silence of a breakup or a separation. But a painkiller, it wears off. And then when that honeymoon phase evaporates, reality rushes right back into the room. And you could possibly wake up one day and realize you're trapped in an absolute prison in a relationship with a parasite while walking on eggshells in every move you make. I want you to think about this. If you're in a rebound, or you've been in one rebound, think about this. Hopefully you've gotten out of it. But if you're still in it, when you first met this person, right? Go back and think about the first month. Some people jump in these things within weeks, which is insane. To me, you might not even have respect for yourself by doing that. But if you did, and you're in one, think about it. The first month you were like, wow, this person is great. They're so friendly. It's like a best friend now, and they don't judge me. I bet you were saying all these things. They just don't judge me, and you've probably told them things that you should have never told somebody when you first get to meet them. But you get sucked in. That dopamine kicks in and all this stuff kicks in, and here you are. You're sitting there saying, this person's great, and this is just what I needed. then you even say things like, maybe God put this person in my life. And then the rebound's probably saying to you, this was like from God. We're meant to be together. You're this, you're that. You're my soulmate. You're my person. You're this, you're that. And all this psychological bullshit. But think about it. In the first month, you were sitting there going, everything you said, right? All this stuff I just went over. They don't judge me. They're this, they're that. They understand. It's different. Now go back to where you are now. Say you're in this 3 months or 6 months. Or you might even be in it longer. You could be in this for a year. I don't know. But now think about the same person. Get a piece of paper and write down on a piece of paper all the things you said in the first month. And write the things down now, what you think of them. And I guarantee you, I'll go back to the first one. They don't judge me. You'll go on the other side of the paper and go, oh my God, this person judges everything I do. Someone finally listens to me. I can tell them anything. Then you go on the other column. Oh my God, I can't tell this person anything. They'll just hold it against me. And you can do this. It's unbelievable. Go down the list. I've seen these studies, and I've actually tried it. I actually did a personal study from rebounds I was in back in the day, and it's so true. It's mind-boggling, actually. And then you'll know you're in a rebound. And it's psychological warfare, man. And that psychological timeline, it proves that you cannot run away from your problems. But people will stay in those prisons anyway. Why? Because of the absolute warning that we read in Proverbs 16:18, and it says this, that a person's arrogance and overconfidence will ultimately lead to their downfall. Proverbs 16:18. Think about that scripture. Pride doesn't just happen right before you trip. Pride actively builds the track that leads straight to your destruction. Your ego, it tells you that you can't look foolish, so you protect a bad recipe. You fake a smile. You try to impress people at family parties and out with your friends or whatever you do out in public, on your Facebook, maybe, I don't know, on your social media. And you stay in some miserable situation because you're just proud to admit to the world that you've made a catastrophic mistake. You would rather drown on your roof than admit that you need to jump in the rescue boat. But God, He can't restore a life that you're actively trying to fake. Healing can only begin the absolute second that your pride breaks you and you choose total, unfiltered honesty. I just was thinking about something. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole. I was just talking to someone the other day, and I said to them, sometimes God sends us things that we just don't see. We just don't see it through all the distraction because the distractions blind us. I asked them if they have ever heard this story. There's a story about a man. He's trapped on a roof during a massive flood. And as the water rises, a rowboat, a motorboat, and a helicopter all offer to save him. But he refuses all of them. Every time they come to save him, he says, I have faith in God, and God will save me. And he ends up drowning. And then, when he gets to heaven, he asks God, why? Why did you let me drown? I had so much faith you were going to save me. And God replied to him, I sent you a rowboat, a motorboat, and a helicopter. You just didn't see that the blessing was from me. And sometimes people might have someone in their life that's that boat or that rowboat or that helicopter, and they were sent to somebody and they just don't see it. They were the boat, they were the helicopter, and they just don't see it. And that's why I brought this story up, because there's no doubt in my mind that if you're in a situation and God sends you a boat or a rowboat or a helicopter in the form of an angel, jump in the boat or jump in that helicopter. And the point is, don't let pride get in the way. Make the move, and whatever you do, start with the first step and put the pride and ego aside and open your eyes and look at the blessings that are probably right in front of you, because you don't want to be that person having that conversation later with God or with yourself, saying, oh my God, it was right in front of me. And I want to get back to talking about what pride really looks like, because today we're talking about pride and ego, and I want this to be positive. But that textbook definition, pride is an inflated sense of our own importance, status, achievements, or abilities. It's the voice inside of us that says, I am right, I know better, I don't need help, I can do this on my own, I don't need to change, I'll figure this out. But on this show, as I said, I want to go deeper than the textbook. I want to look at the soul. And spiritually speaking, pride is a very expensive defense mechanism. It's that wall built around ourselves when we're afraid to admit that we're wrong, we're hurting, we made mistakes, afraid to admit that the life we're living is not the life we imagined, and how the hell we ever get stuck in this? How the hell did we get involved in this? How the hell did we even get here? And the irony is that pride promises protection, but often it becomes a prison. I know someone who told me they're living in a prison in their own home. I know people who are trapped in jobs that they hate because of pride. Relationships that are so unhealthy, and they stay in them. Arguments that should have ended years ago. Patterns that no longer serve them. Sometimes pride even keeps fighting battles that we secretly know that we've already lost. And why? Because admitting the truth feels harder than continuing the struggle. That's what it is, pride. Pride will make a person spend months, years, sometimes decades protecting a mistake rather than finding the courage to correct it. I talked about it in one of my episodes when the woman, she keeps coming to mind, and I haven't seen her yet. Hadn't talked to her son 15 years. Decade and a half. Pride. I told you about my situation. I didn't talk to my daughter. We had a falling out. And was I right? Probably. But it doesn't matter. I let the pride get in the way, and I missed my whole granddaughter's life. I saw her when she was a baby in the hospital. And the next time I seen her, in a casket. Terrible. It's terrible. Pride. Ego. No freaking good, man. I'm trying to go positive here. I want to keep moving forward in my life and on this podcast, but I go down these rabbit holes and I let this stuff get to me. But it's such an important topic, pride and ego. And the reason why I'm doing this episode is I have a long list of potential episodes that I want to do. And somebody gave me this idea this week. Someone suggested I do one on pride and ego. And I went and looked at my notes, and I'm like, there it is. I had the same thing written down that I wanted to talk about one day. So I said, you know what? I want to be positive in this season 3, and going forward, all of them actually. But I think this is a good one to move forward. This is things we need to hear. Because an ego whispers the same lie over and over. It says, just keep going. Don't admit it. Don't turn around. Don't let anyone know. Keep it quiet. Don't let anybody know about your personal life. But wisdom says something different. You know what wisdom says? The sooner you face the truth, the sooner you can be free. The sooner you make the move, the better you'll be. And maybe one of the greatest acts of courage in life is not holding on. Nope. Maybe it's having the humility just to sit back and say, you know what? This is not working. I need help. I was wrong. And perhaps the hottest words of all, I need to change. And I don't know what situation you're in. I don't know. You could have family problems. You can have marital problems. You can have work-related problems. You could have a relationship issue. It could be a reconciliation issue. Who knows what it is. But you know what? Don't let your pride and ego stand in the way. And I could go down so many rabbit holes here, but if someone's trying to help you and you just got too much pride to say, I need the help, don't do that. I knew somebody that needed some help and they would not ask for it. And I said to them, you have to accept help sometimes, and it's okay to ask. And I almost had to force them to accept help, which is crazy, but this is our pride and our ego. And sometimes, yes, sometimes we just don't want someone to think we're taking advantage of them, because there's a lot of mooches out there, and there's a lot of bad people out there who are just in situations because they need something that's benefiting them. And I'm not talking that. I'm talking a genuine person with a good heart Because one of the most fascinating things psychologists have discovered is that human beings hate admitting they're wrong. They hate it. In fact, the more time, energy, money, emotion, and effort that we invest in something, the harder it becomes to walk away from it. Isn't it crazy? I know people who have stayed in terrible investments because they invested so much money. People stay in jobs because they've invested so many years. They put up with all kind of stuff, and they just stay because their pride and their ego. People stay in so many arguments because they've already invested pride. People stay in unhealthy situations because admitting the truth would require them to admit that they made a mistake. And that's your damn pride. And you know what? In church, my pastor says this all the time. Pastor Brian, I've been seeing him preach for over 20 years. And he says it so many times. If you come to church, if you don't leave different than when you walked in the door, it's not your past. It's your pride. It's so true. And mentioning businesses and marriages and friendships and addiction and politics and life and all these things, you can relate to it. You can relate to all these things. You probably know somebody or yourself that's done one or all those things. Because you know what pride says? It says, I've come way too far to turn around. That's your pride saying that to you. Oh, I'm just better off staying in this situation because this, because that. It's foolishness. It's pride and ego. And if you're heading in the wrong direction, turning around is exactly what you should do. That's what you should do. I'm going to say that again to you. If you are heading in the wrong direction, turning around is exactly what you should do. You know how I always say, don't look in the rearview mirror, look forward? Yes, definitely go forward. Do not look in the rearview mirror. But if you're heading in the wrong direction, definitely turn around and go back. This is a totally different situation. If you're heading in the wrong direction, turn around and go back. Okay? Because when a hiker is hiking and he realizes he's on the wrong trail, because the farther he walks, the harder it becomes to admit he's lost. And eventually pride whispers this, just keep going. But every step takes him farther from where he needs to be. And that is pride and ego right there. And that leads me to asking you this difficult question. When was the last time that you were completely wrong about something? Completely wrong. Not a little wrong. Not partially wrong. I'm talking completely wrong. And more importantly, how long did it take you to admit it? Because I've learned something over the years. We can tell you exactly where your spouse is wrong. We can tell you exactly what your husband's doing wrong, what your wife's doing wrong, what your kid's doing wrong, what this one's doing wrong, exactly where our boss is wrong, exactly where our friends are wrong, exactly where society is wrong. But the person that we struggle to see clearly is the one staring back at us in the mirror. That's why pride is so dangerous. Pride doesn't blind us to everyone else's flaws. Pride blinds us to our own. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to give advice? It's so easy, isn't it? It's easy to tell someone else to apologize. You should say sorry. How many times do you do that to someone? It's so easy to tell someone else how to forgive. It's so easy to tell them, just let go. Move on. You don't need that. You can do better. Isn't it easy? How many people have said that to you? I can't even count in the last year how many people have said that to me. It's so easy to tell other people, just change. It's so easy to tell somebody else to just change. Move on. But when it's our own turn, suddenly the situation feels different, doesn't it? Suddenly we have reasons. Suddenly we have excuses. Suddenly we have justifications. You know what that is? Ego. Ego is the lawyer that lives in your head. It works overtime defending us, explaining us, protecting us, excusing us. Meanwhile, humility walks right in the courtroom and says, maybe I'm not seeing this clearly. Maybe I need to learn something here. Maybe I have a blind spot. Maybe I should do this, or maybe I should do that. The strongest people I've ever met weren't the people who never made mistakes. The strongest people that I've met were the ones willing to look in that mirror and own them. Those are the strong people that I met. because growth begins where excuses end, and every person listening today has a choice. Defend your ego or develop your character. And usually, you can't do both. Doesn't work that way. And I want to tell you a story that I came across. It's called the cracked pot story when I was doing my research. A water bearer in India carried 2 pots suspended from a pole across his shoulders. I don't know if you've ever seen this when these people, they got these poles and there's 2 pots on each side. You ever see this? You've probably seen this in different countries. So one pot was perfect and the other pot had a crack in it. Every day, the cracked pot arrived only half full. And for years, that cracked pot, it felt ashamed. One day, it apologized to the water bearer. The pot said, "I'm sorry I'm defective. I only do half the job." And the water bearer smiled and said, "Have you noticed the flowers on the side of your path?" And that pot, it took a look. Beautiful flowers stretched over the entire length of the trail. And the water bearer explained, "I always knew about your crack. So I planted seeds on your side of the road, and every day you watered them. And that perfect pot on this side, yes, it delivered the water. But you created beauty. Because pride hides the crack. And ego says, pretend you're perfect. And humility says, maybe God can use my imperfections too." Okay? It was a cool little story I found. And another one that I found that I love, it's the samurai and the tea master. A humble tea master was mistaken for a famous samurai and challenged to a duel. So he was terrified. He sought advice from a sword master, and the sword master said, "Tomorrow, stand before your opponent exactly the way you prepare your tea. Calm, present, and honest." And the next day, the tea master stood with complete peace. The samurai looked at him and suddenly doubted himself. He apologized and he walked away. And the lesson here? Confidence comes from truth and ego comes from performance. That's a cool little story too. Someone told me they love the little stories I put on here, so I got one more for you. This one's about the 2 wolves. So an old Cherokee grandfather told his grandson this. Inside every person, there are 2 wolves. One is pride, anger, resentment, ego, and envy. And the other one is humility, kindness, gratitude, faith, and love. So the grandson asked him, which wolf wins? And the grandfather replied, the one that you feed. So what wolf have you been feeding lately? Which one? Maybe the goal of life isn't to become flawless. Maybe the goal is to become useful. Pride wants perfection, and God works through the cracks. That's pretty much the moral of that story. I want you to imagine that you're driving somewhere that you'd never been before. Maybe it's a concert, maybe it's a vacation, maybe a job interview, I don't know. You punch the address into your GPS and you just start driving. 20 minutes go by, 30 minutes go by, an hour goes by. You realize something. You're lost. You've been going in the wrong direction. Now here's the question. So what's the smartest thing that you can do? Turn around, right? Simple, obvious, logical. But isn't it amazing how many people refuse to do that in life? We just keep driving. Not because we're heading towards the destination, but because we've already invested so much time, so much energy, emotion, so much pride. We tell ourselves, I've already come this far. I can't turn around now. I'll figure it out. I'll make it work. Something will get better. Nope, it's not happening. And before we know it, we're 2 hours farther away from where we were trying to go. The wrong road doesn't become the right road just because you spent a long time driving on it. It will never become the right road. And one of the hardest lessons in life is learning that turning around isn't failure. Sometimes turning around is wisdom, it's courage, it's growth. And sometimes the most prideful thing we can do is keep driving, while the most humble thing we can do is just admit that we're lost. And I've learned that God can redirect a person who refuses to admit that they're off course, because pride keeps saying, just keep driving. And wisdom says, turn around. Quietly says it, turn around. And the beautiful thing is this. The moment that you admit you're lost, you're finally in a position to be found. So think of it that way. And I'll tell you this story. So this traveler, he visits a dense jungle and he notices a beautiful bird that's trapped inside this golden cage swinging from a branch. So the door to the cage is actually wide open, but the bird refuses to step out. Day after day, the traveler watches the bird pacing back and forth inside the small cage, singing a song that sounds more like a cry than a melody. And predators occasionally circle the tree, and the bird shivers in terror, yet it stays inside the cage. And finally, the traveler goes over and he asks the village elder why the bird just doesn't leave through the open door. And the elder replied this: that bird spent years boasting to the entire jungle about how beautiful and expensive its golden cage was. It built its entire identity on that cage. Now, it would rather stay inside this tiny prison and starve to death walking on eggshells every day than to step outside and admit to the world that its beautiful cage was actually a trap. Folks, that bird didn't stay because the door was locked. It stayed because its pride wouldn't let it walk away from a beautiful mistake. It would rather die in a golden jail than look foolish stepping out into the sky. It reminds me about this historical metaphor that I found about this legendary shipwreck that was caused entirely by ego and missed a clean rescue boat. In the freezing waters of the North Atlantic, a massive state-of-the-art passenger liner was sailing through a known ice field. Another vessel, a smaller cargo ship just miles away, spots the massive icebergs ahead and telegraphs a desperate warning to the great liner. He says, "Stop your engines, icebergs directly in your path." And the captain of this great liner, completely consumed by the pride of the ship's unbeatable reputation and ego, he radios back a cold, arrogant reply. He says, "Shut up. Mind your business. I'm a master of the sea, and this ship is unsinkable." And the smaller ship, having done its part, shuts down its radios and goes to sleep. So hours later, the great liner hits the ice, and the hull splits wide open, and it sinks into the dark abyss because the captain was too proud to listen to a warning from a smaller boat. So think about that captain. The rescue boat was right there in the water next to him. The warning was clear, but his ego wouldn't let him turn the wheel. He would rather take down the whole ship and freeze in the dock than admit that a smaller boat knew the path better than he did. Isn't that crazy? There's so many stories like this. How about the story of the emperor's new clothes? A king became obsessed with appearances. He loved fancy clothes, status, and what people thought about him. Then out of nowhere, two con artists arrive and they tell him that they can make the most magnificent suit in the world. There's only one catch. They claim that the suit can only be seen by intelligent people. But anyone who can't see it must be foolish. So the king doesn't want to look foolish. His advisors don't want to look foolish. And the townspeople don't want to look foolish. So everyone pretends that they can see the suit. They compliment it, they praise it, they celebrate it. The king becomes so convinced that he marches through the town wearing absolutely nothing. And everyone continues the performance until a little child points and says, "Wait a minute, he's not wearing any clothes." And suddenly the spell is broken. The truth was there the entire time. Everyone can see it, and nobody wanted to admit it. And why? Pride, ego, fear. The need to protect an image, the need to avoid embarrassment, and the need to pretend that everything was fine when it wasn't. And isn't that what happens in life sometimes? People stay in situations everybody knows aren't working. People continue pretending, continue performing, continue protecting appearances, continue defending decisions, and not because the truth isn't obvious, but because admitting the truth would require humility. And the child in that story wasn't smarter than everyone else. He was just simply honest. And sometimes the most powerful words in this world are, "This isn't working. This isn't healthy. This isn't who I want to be. Or maybe I need help." Just ask for help. Jump in the boat or the helicopter. Just ask for it and take it, because truth begins where performance ends. And I want to take you to one of the most powerful stories in the Bible. I talk about the Bible a lot in these episodes, and if you don't know who King David is that I reference in many episodes? King David wasn't just some king in the Bible. This is the same King David that defeated Goliath, the same David that wrote many of the Psalms, and the same David that God described as a man after his own heart. But David made a terrible mistake. He committed adultery with Bathsheba and arranged for her husband Uriah to be killed in battle. And I recommend reading this story yourself in the Bible. And when this happened, for a time, David convinced himself that everything was fine, until the prophet Nathan came to him and told him a story about a rich man stealing a poor man's only lamb. David became so furious that he demanded justice. And then Nathan looked at him and said, "You are the man." In that moment, David saw himself very clearly. The remarkable thing wasn't that David had sinned. The remarkable thing is what happened next. He humbled himself. He repented. Repentance is so important. He stopped defending his actions and he started taking responsibility for them. That's why God continued to use David. Because pride keeps defending and humility starts changing. Hopefully you'll go read it, but in summary, the story kind of goes like this. While David's army was away at war, David stayed behind in Jerusalem. And from the roof of his palace, he saw a beautiful woman bathing, and he found out her name was Bathsheba. She was the wife of Uriah, and Uriah was one of David's most loyal elite soldiers. And despite her marital status, David brought her over to his palace and he slept with her. And shortly after that, David found out that she was pregnant. And you know what David did? He was so desperate to hide that sin that he summoned Uriah. He called for Uriah to come home from battle just so he could sleep with his wife and everybody would assume that the child was his. But this guy Uriah was such a great person, a great soldier, and so loyal. He refused to come home. He said, "I'm staying with my soldiers on the battlefield." So when that plan failed, David went back to the drawing board and he said, "I got to come up with a different plan." Now, I don't know if he panicked, or we don't know David's heart right there, but what he did was, when he found out Uriah would not come back, he made orders to his military commander to put Uriah right in the front of the line. And this was a sealed letter to his military commander, and the letter gave orders to put Uriah right in the fiercest point of the battle. And then he told the commander to abandon him, ensuring that he would be killed. And the plan succeeded. Uriah got killed in combat, and after a period of mourning, David went and brought Bathsheba back to his palace to be his wife. But God was so deeply displeased with David's actions, he sent the prophet Nathan to confront him. And Nathan was very clever, and what he did was he used the story instead of confronting him. He knew what happened, and he told David a story. He said there was two men in the city, a rich one and a poor one. And the rich man had tons of sheep and cattle. But the poor man only had one beloved lamb that he loved, and he raised it like it was his daughter. So this rich man had a traveler that was visiting him. And what he did was, instead of using one of his own animals for the feast that he was going to have, he stole the poor man's lamb and fed it to his guests. David got so upset when he heard this. He said that the rich man deserved to die. He said he must repay that lamb fourfold. And Nathan delivered the famous rebuke to him. He said to David, "You are the man." Nathan laid out the reality of David's sins, that he had everything he could ever have, but he chose to take another man's wife and have that man killed. David immediately confesses. He says, "I have sinned against the Lord." And Nathan assured him that God had forgiven his sin, that he would not die, but there would be severe, painful consequences for these actions. And the consequences, they included that his infant son, born from their adulterous union, became severely ill and died. And David went into intense fasting and prayer. And then the declaration that the sword would never depart from David's house, resulting in deep betrayal, violence, and rebellion among David's older children in the years to come. And despite this tragedy, David and Bathsheba repented and had another son named Solomon. And God loved Solomon. He sent the prophet Nathan to name him Jedediah, meaning beloved of the Lord. Ultimately, Solomon went on to succeed David as king of Israel and build the first temple. It's a great story, and if you want to go read it, it's in 2 Samuel and chapters 11 and 12, I believe. So think about it. David could see the sin clearly when it belonged to someone else. He just couldn't see it in himself. And isn't that exactly what pride does? It sharpens our vision for everybody else's mistakes while blinding us to our own. But the beautiful part of the story isn't David's failure. It's what happened next. David didn't have Nathan arrested. He didn't make excuses. He didn't blame someone else. He didn't double down. He humbled himself, and he admitted the truth. And in that moment, the healing began. And not because David was perfect, but because he was finally honest. God can work with a broken heart, and he can work with a repentant spirit, and he can work with somebody who says, I messed up. I need help. What God struggles to work with is a person who refuses to acknowledge the truth, because pride says protect your image, and humility says tell the truth. Pride says defend yourself, and humility says change yourself. And maybe the greatest lesson in David's life is this: your mistake doesn't define you, but your response to the truth does. Because the moment David stopped defending himself, he started releasing the pride. And there's a verse most people have heard before, even if they don't know where it comes from. Proverbs 16:18 says, pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. For years, I thought that verse was talking about arrogance, like the loud guy, the know-it-all, person who thinks they're better than everyone else. Now I realize it means something so much deeper. Pride doesn't cause the fall. Pride builds the track that leads to it. And one small decision at a time, one excuse at a time, one justification at a time, one ignored warning at a time, until eventually the consequences arrive. And you can go read about King David yourself. Maybe it'll get you into study. As I'm thinking about the story and the proverb, it made me think about something personal I've experienced and something I recently experienced that I think would fit into this podcast. I want to take you out of the studio for a minute, and I want to take you to a place that I was performing just the other night. I was sitting there at the bar, and the owner and his girlfriend broke out into a massive fight. It was ugly. It was fueled by pure anger, and right in front of my eyes, I watched pride and ego take the wheel. He looked at her. He said, get out, leave, don't ever come back. And I was just watching this, and they both were saying mean things, and it was out of control. And she ended up walking out right into the dark. She left. As soon as she was gone, the owner started venting to me. He was pacing back and forth, justified in his anger, saying, I'm not putting up with this stuff. This is stupid. Men put up with this and that, and you know how it goes. And he's just saying all kind of stuff to me. My heart absolutely broke for him. I wanted so badly to just grab him by the shoulders, look him in the eyes, and say, hey, man, swallow your pride right now, and don't let your ego destroy your future. Pick up the phone and make sure you call her tomorrow. Because if you wait, if you let that silence drag out, things can happen out there in the dark that you will regret every single day for the rest of your life. And as those words were exchanged between them, feelings were hurt. She left. He was angry. She was angry. And as I was just standing there watching it, as I said, I just wanted to grab him and say, dude, make sure you call her. And not because he was wrong, and not because she was right, or not because she was wrong or he was right, but because pride has a funny way of turning temporary problems into permanent ones. And I know this because I witnessed it myself. I've lived it. But that being said, I didn't say anything to him. His anger was too loud at the moment. But I'm saying it to you today on this microphone because I know the cost of that silence. Not saying something. And back when I had a stupid drunk fight with someone I really loved, And I did the same thing. You heard this in the podcast. I kicked her out. My pride built the wall. And I let 27 days pass without making a phone call. It was so dumb and prideful. And the reason why? Because my pride was stronger. My pride was stronger than my common sense. And I just swore that she was going to come back like she always did. And in those 27 days, she was sitting there crying at a bar one day, feeling abandoned. This parasite walked in and found her. A demon crawled into her hardships and took advantage of her pain. So don't do what I did. Don't let a few weeks of stubbornness cost you a lifetime of true love. Because God cannot fix a future that you are actively burning down with your ego. I spent 27 days after the biggest fight of my life refusing to make a call that I should have made because of pride. Because what happens is it starts a chain of regret and pain for both involved. She had said to me that she wishes I would have stopped her that night. So my pride and ego, it didn't just cause me pain, it caused both of us pain. It caused all these things I just talked about to both of us. And we both played a role in it. I'm not beating myself up anymore. She made decisions as well. The point is, do not let your pride and your ego dictate your life. And whether you're talking about relationships, family, friendships, or business, sometimes pride keeps us from taking the very step that could just change everything. Sometimes we're so busy trying to win the argument that we lose the person. And that's the danger of ego. It tells us we're protecting our dignity, when in reality, we may just be protecting our fear. Pride is the only disease that makes everyone sick except for the person who has it. The reason pride is so dangerous is because it hides in the mirror. We can see it in everybody else, but we just struggle to see it in ourselves. Pride is a strange thing. It can convince us that we're protecting ourselves when actually we're trapping ourselves. It builds prisons while humility opens doors. And the hardest person to confront is that one in the mirror. And when this happened in my personal experience, she had no idea I was in misery for those 27 days. Terrible misery. She thought I just had moved on. And I didn't. My son can attest for me. I was in tough shape. But that being said, why do people, when pride and ego causes these problems, why do people stay in situations that make them miserable and stay in them? Why is it so difficult to admit that we've made a mistake? Why do we sometimes spend more time defending our decisions than changing them? You know why? Pride and ego. And leading up to this is why music always connects so deeply with people, right? Because the songs remind us of truths that we already know, but sometimes forget. And I'm going to put a playlist down below in the description, and one of the songs is going to be Hallelujah, and it's about David. It's a very inspiring song. Read the lyrics as you listen to that song. It'll be in the playlist. As we close this out today, I want you to think about one question. Where in your life is pride costing you peace? Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a family member. Maybe it's a friendship. Maybe it's a business decision. Maybe it's a dream you've been chasing. Maybe it's simply a refusal to admit that something needs to change in your life. Whatever it is, pride always sends the same message. Keep defending, keep explaining, keep hiding, keep justifying, keep pretending. But humility asks the different question. What if the truth could set me free? We've talked about all these masks that we wear. We've talked about the cost of always needing to be right. We talked about the mirror, the wrong road, the emperor's new clothes, King David, and all these stories point to the same truth. Freedom begins where pride ends. The greatest prisons in life are rarely built by other people. They're built by our own fear, our own stubbornness, our own ego. But the good news is that every prison has a door, and humility holds the key to it. The person who says I was wrong, I need help, I need change, I need to change, isn't losing. They're finally beginning to win, because the strongest people aren't the ones who fall. The strongest people are the ones willing to get back up, tell the truth, and keep moving forward. And maybe that's what God has been trying to teach us all along. Not how to be perfect, but how to be humble enough to grow. So bow your heads with me. Heavenly Father, today we come before you humbled, not because we have all the answers, not because we have everything figured out, but because life has a way of teaching us that we're not nearly as strong, wise, or in control sometimes as we believe. Lord, if there is pride in us, reveal it. If there is stubbornness in us, soften it. If there is ego in us, break it gently before life breaks it painfully. Help us to be people who seek truth more than validation, wisdom more than victory, character more than appearances, and teach us the courage to admit when we're wrong, the humility to apologize, the strength to forgive, and the grace to learn from our mistakes instead of defending them. And Father, help us to stop performing for the world and start living honestly before you. Give us eyes to see ourselves clearly, not through pride or fear or ego, but through truth. Lord, for anyone listening today who feels trapped by a decision, a mistake, a relationship, a habit, or a season of life that they no longer recognize, remind them that there is no shame in turning around. There is no shame in asking for help, and there is no shame in changing direction. Because growth is not weakness, growth is wisdom. And Father, help us to remember that tomorrow is not a guarantee. Help us to appreciate the people we love, the opportunities that we've been given, the blessings we've overlooked, and the lessons that you continue to place before us every day. May we walk forward with humility, lead us with integrity, love with sincerity, and live with gratitude. And I want to pray for everyone listening who feels trapped inside of a prison that they built themselves. The person who knows that they need to change, but they can't seem to take that first step. The person who knows that they need to have the conversation. The person who knows that they need to apologize. The person who knows that they need to forgive. The person who knows that they need to turn around, but pride keeps whispering to them, keep going. Lord, break through those walls. Give us the courage where we've been afraid, and give us the humility where we've been stubborn, and give us wisdom where we've been blind. And we know you're tugging at our hearts. We know we should be making moves. We know we should be turning around. We know we should be moving in a different direction. So help us to see it, and help us just to make the move, and help us to stop protecting our ego and stop protecting our future. I pray for those who feel suffocated by silent prisons of pride, fear, regret, appearances, expectations, and the need to always be right. Remind them that freedom begins with honesty, and it doesn't matter what anybody thinks. It doesn't really matter. Remind us that you already know the truth, and you love them anyway. Help us to trust your timing instead of forcing our own, and help us to trust your plan instead of defending our own. And help us to remember that every journey toward healing begins with a single step. In Jesus' mighty, precious, holy name, amen. And after that prayer, ask the Lord to help you trade your pride for peace. And that's really the entire episode in one sentence. And before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought. Most people think the opposite of pride is weakness, but it isn't. The opposite of pride is humility, and humility is one of the strongest forces on this earth. Humility is the father who picks up the phone first. Humility is the friend who says, I'm sorry. Humility is the person who asks for help. Humility is the leader who admits that they don't know everything. Humility is the man or woman who looks in the mirror and says, I still have work to do. Pride builds walls. Humility builds bridges. Pride isolates, and humility reconnects. Pride protects an image, and humility transforms a life. So make the call. Pick up the phone if it's needed. Call your soulmate. Call your mom. Call your son. Call your daughter. Call your dad. Call your friend. Whoever. And if there's one thing I hope you take away from today's conversation, Your future is not being held hostage by your mistakes. It's being shaped by your willingness to learn from them. And the strongest people I know are not the people who fell. They're the people who were humble enough to get back up. So wherever you find yourself today, don't be afraid to tell the truth. Don't be afraid to change direction. And don't be afraid to grow. Don't let pride and ego get in the way. If you don't listen to your inner soul and do what's right, that's your pride getting in the way. That's what it is. It's your pride. Because growth begins the moment that pride steps aside and wisdom takes the wheel. And that's where real freedom starts. And as we close out this episode, I want to leave you with one more final truth to carry you through your week. If you're that person up on that highway right now, suffocating in a prison of your own making, hear me loud and clear. Your pride is costing you your future. Stop looking at your mistakes as a permanent sentence. Drop the mask, drop the ego, and have the courage to take the first step towards your freedom. God didn't give you a map just to watch you stay lost in the dark. And if you're the person acting like the safety net right now, tearing yourself apart to cushion someone else's dysfunction, it's time to roll up the net. Let them feel the gravity of the choices they've made. You cannot heal someone who's content with staying asleep in a jail cell. Stand firm on your own shoreline, protect your spirit, and trust that God is paving a clean path forward for you. Thank you for tuning in to Cracked Open, and if this episode hit home for you, please share it with someone who needs to break out of their prison today. Keep listening, keep praying, and most importantly, keep healing. And those of you who have shared my podcast or liked it, I encourage you to go on here and comment, and let's hear your story. Maybe you could help somebody. And keep sending the messages and keep sharing and subscribing. I really appreciate it. So I'm Glen, and until next week, stay cracked open. And remember, pride is very expensive, and not because it costs money, but because it costs time, relationships, opportunities, peace, and sometimes years of our lives. And humility doesn't guarantee you'll never make a mistake, but it gives you the courage to correct one. So wherever you find yourself today, ask yourself, what truth have I been avoiding? What conversation have I been postponing? What step have I been afraid to take? Because freedom is often waiting on the other side of honesty. And maybe the greatest lesson of all is that God can't steer a parked car. So take the step, make the call, tell the truth, drop the mask, and trust Him with the road ahead. Thank you for tuning in to Cracked Open. Please keep listening, learning, praying, and growing with me. And most importantly, keep healing. And remember, pride builds the track that leads to the fall. Defend your ego or develop your character. You usually can't do both. And the moment that you admit you're lost, you're finally in a position to be found. Your mistake doesn't define you. Your response to the truth does. Remember that your integrity is your legacy. Treat others the way you want to be treated. God has no favorites, and either does karma. So take care of yourself. I love you, and I'll see you next week on Cracked Open. This has been Glen Nunes. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to Cracked Open. If today's episode spoke to you, please share it with someone who might need a little light in their own dark season. Remember, even in brokenness, there's beauty waiting to be found. Every crack is a place where the light can shine through. Until next time, stay true, stay hopeful, and keep your heart open.